Hello, I'm Alicia, and welcome to Country Music Around the World, presented by the Nashville Broadcasting Radio Network. Today is February 18th, 2021, and I have the distinct honor and pleasure to interview my boss, Keith Bradford. A few weeks ago, Keith gave me a fabulous assignment. He said he wanted me to interview special guests for his show, You Gotta Love It, on NBRN. I'm having a great time, and I'm really honored to have been given such an opportunity. But then I began to think, well, Keith is a great artist and musician, and he has such an interesting history in the music industry himself. I wonder what it would be like to interview him. So I asked, and surprisingly he agreed. So here is that interview with the fabulous Keith Bradford.
Coming at you in 3, 2, 1. We're on.
Hey Keith, how are you?
I'm doing good. I'll tell you what, this is the craziest weather. You told me earlier this morning you don't have any snow.
No, we've had no snow whatsoever.
We are iced in. I got the mail a few minutes ago, the first time in 3 days.
Holy cow. Well, I've talked to several of my friends up there, and I was watching Rhonda Vincent's little video that she made of going out of their property and then back in later, down the hill and up the hill, and she was petrified. And that was 2 days ago.
Crazy.
So it's even worse now. I talked to Billy Robinson yesterday and Lynn Owsley, and they said it's just scary. It's scary.
Yeah, it's not good. It's good. Dina Wood over there in Texas, they don't have electric. They don't have water.
I know. You know, that is so sad to me because you mentioned earlier on your broadcast, what about water? People who have well water out in the country like we do, that's bad enough. But one thing that came to my mind, since I have a friend who relies on oxygen, is if you're without power for a length of time, you've got your portable units, but those things have to be recharged or new batteries or whatever. You've got no oxygen. You know, this could be really bad for a lot of people.
It is. It's horrible. It's horrible.
I wonder if people who are on oxygen, I wonder if there are emergency services that can bring them generators or what have you, because that's life-threatening.
It is. It is.
You know, we're fortunate, aren't we? We're sitting in our comfy little places, and it's nice and warm and toasty, and sitting here talking to each other, and we're lucky. But there are a lot of people who aren't so fortunate, and you know me, I'm going to talk about God every chance I get, and I just think we need to really pray for people and ourselves all the time.
You're right about that. You are.
And there's
right
a lot of
about that.
power in prayer.
You're right on, spot on today.
Well, let's talk about music. Let's talk about interviews. Let's talk about all of these great people that I've been interviewing. You know, it was so cool. Not everybody knows this, but you called me one day for an interview. And I said, yeah, I'd be excited to do an interview. And you interviewed me. And after the conversation, we talked a little bit. And I said, you know, I miss singing. I miss getting out and performing. But I used to do TV. I would love to do something, you know, to stay involved, do an interview or do anything. You said, well, do you want to do an interview for me? I said, sure, that'd be great. The next thing I know, you're sending me people and people and people to do interviews. And it's overwhelming. And I want to do so much. I want to do the YouTube videos. I want to do all of these things. And I find that I run out of time in a day, but I am having a ball doing this. And I'm getting a little bit more organized with it.
That's the whole key. The whole key is when you do so many things involved with the music business, like interviews and videos and posters for the teasers on Facebook. When you do so many things, you have to get organized or you'll feel overwhelmed and you won't want to do it anymore.
Well, I did feel overwhelmed, but to me, when I get overwhelmed, it's like a challenge. It's like, tell me I can't. So I move forward. But I want to talk about you. I asked you this morning if I could interview you, so I want to do that. You have a history. I talk about all of these people I've interviewed that have a history in music, but you have quite a history, and you played bass with Kitty Wells, and you know all of these people you've recorded, you sing, you play. I want to know about Keith Bradford, the musician.
You know, when you're old, like I am.
I wouldn't know about that.
You do have a history.
Joke.
You do have a history. You've been around so long, and having started at 8 years old, from 8 to 72, there's bound to be some kind of a history, you know? So, I mean, I don't know how far back you want to go. 8 years old, I was taking piano lessons. My parents insisted that somebody in the family was going to be some kind of a musician, even if it wasn't a good one. They wanted to have somebody that could play an instrument because they couldn't. So
This Pepsi, by the way.
Oh, okay.
Everybody says, is that a Bud Light or whatever those things are? And I said, no, that's a Pepsi. Just thought I'd tell you that. Go ahead.
Okay. Well, the piano lesson started at 8 years old, but that came to an abrupt ending. Not a nice one either. My native state is Rhode Island.
Oh,
and
really?
They have trees up there that are native. I don't believe they have them in the South. They're called pig nuts. Pig nut trees, and not to be confused with Rocky Mountain oysters. They're pig nuts. That's what they're called. Okay?
I love it.
And the problem with them is the husk, the shell that's around them. When they fall off the tree, us kids would all go around the neighborhood and we would gather them up because, especially the old folks, they're a real sweet meat on the inside.
Oh.
They're really, really, really good. If you have the patience to crack them open and get the meat out of them, because they're tiny. They're only a little bit smaller than a quarter, a coin, a quarter.
It sounds like hickory nuts, kind of.
They're shaped kind of like that, but they're called pig nuts. Well, anyway, the husk has a stain, a real bad stain. When you peel it off, it leaves your fingers looking like you soaked them in iodine.
Oh my goodness.
And it takes weeks as a kid to wash it off. And the stain itself looks just like I said, it looks like iodine, and it almost has to wear off.
Oh my goodness, that's terrible.
So I had taken 2 or 3 piano lessons and was barely playing chopsticks. That's how bad I was. And the teacher was the church organist. St. Joseph's Church had one of those great big huge pipe organs up in the loft, or whatever they call that thing where the choir sang.
Yeah.
But she played the pipe organ for all the church services and weddings and funerals and all that stuff. Well, on the side, she gave piano lessons at her home, and she had this beautiful baby grand piano sitting there in her living room where the students like me would come in to get their piano lesson. Well, I showed up with this, both hands full of this iodine-looking stain on my every finger. And she said, "I'm sorry, I'm calling your parents. You're not touching my piano with them hands." And that was the end of my piano lesson.
It got you off the hook, didn't it?
That was the end of my piano lessons. So that started at 8. A couple of years went by with no music. My grandparents are from Montreal, Quebec, Canada, and they loved polkas. They just absolutely adored that kind of music. And there's a French thing called the quadrille. It's a kind of a circle square dance thing. And they wanted me to learn how to play accordion. Well, I didn't want to learn how to play accordion, but my parents insisted they were going to pay for it. And by the time I had taken 2 years of accordion lessons, all the family would get together on Sundays, especially for picnics in the summer. And the grandkids, no matter what they could do, in my case, I was playing the accordion. Other kids tap danced, and other kids could twirl a baton. And one kid took ballerina lessons. Every kid had their turn for this little floor show on Sunday afternoon.
That's an awesome idea.
And one by one, we would get up there and do what we could do. And the little tiny ones, it was nothing more than reciting the alphabet. But the point is, each grandkid got their shot in front of all the aunts and uncles and the cousins and nieces and nephews. We'd get up there and we'd do our thing. Well, I'd get up there and start hammering away on one of those polkas, and all my relatives was throwing nickels at me. And by the time I got through playing that polka, I get down on my hands and knees and pick up all them nickels. Sometimes I'd have $2.
That's incentive, isn't it?
And at 10 years old,
Yeah.
I made up my mind right there. I want to be in show business. I want to be a musician. If this is all I got to do is play a polka to make $2, I want to do this. I want to do
Oh,
this.
we didn't word that simple.
It started, and it's kept going. It just migrated into lots of things. But it started at 8 years old with piano lessons, and 10 years old accordion lessons, and playing in front of an audience that paid me to do it. And that's all. I was hooked.
So moving forward, you ended up playing guitar, bass, what have you. I guess the way most people do, you just pick it up because it's easier to carry around or whatever, and you start playing. And then you played in maybe garage bands or whatever and moved your way up. And then how did you get up with Kitty Wells?
I auditioned for Opryland in New York in 1976. At that time, the Opryland amusement park had gone all the way as far as Bangor, Maine. They had gone to 26 major cities that year in 1976, looking for new talent for the 1977 season.
Yeah.
And so I went to New York. I was doing some demos for Jimmy Crane in a recording studio, and we had all taken a break, and he was reading the New York Times, and he said, "Keith, look at this." And I went over, and he showed me this ad that said, Opryland USA auditioning new talent. It was at the Harlequin Rehearsal Studios in New York City. And I had a car with 4 ball tires and had to stop every 20 miles and put water in the radiator. And I said, I can't go to New York City. He said, well, you can go if I buy you a train ticket. So he bought me a train ticket, and I got my guitar and I got on that train in Providence, Rhode Island, and went to New York City to the Harlequin Rehearsal Studios. It was in the dead of winter. And when I got there, there was a line that was shaped like a jelly roll. It went all the way around the building 3 or 4 times.
Oh my goodness.
And I finally got my turn to stand up there and sing a song in front of those 6 judges that were sitting at the table that were determining who was going to go to Opryland with a job and who wasn't.
Were you scared?
Petrified. Didn't even know what I was doing. I sang the most comfortable song for me at the time that I could sing, that I was singing in the bars. I sang Merle Haggard's Silver Wings.
Oh, yeah.
And one of the judges, after I got through, one of the judges, he said, well, that was pretty good, but is that the only voice you have? And then I really got frightened because I said,
Well, if she sounded like you just sounded, I think I would have put that one right back in her lap.
that was a he.
Oh, no.
That was a he that said that.
Oh, my goodness.
Which made it even more petrifying.
Yeah, for real.
I said, well, I don't know what you mean, sir. That's my voice. That's how I sing. And he said, well, can you do any other voices? I said, well, yes. I said, I can sing a verse and a chorus of Waltz Across Texas by Ernest Tubb. And he said, oh, I have to hear this. Go ahead, proceed. So I sang a verse and a chorus of Waltz Across Texas, and he literally fell on the floor.
Really?
And they said, can you come back tomorrow for callbacks? I said, yeah, I guess. I think I got enough to stay in a hotel tonight. And I had enough. I stayed at the Roosevelt Hotel in Manhattan. And I went back the next day, and I had already passed the singing audition.
Uh-huh.
Because the callbacks was the dance auditions. Because you couldn't work at Opryland in those shows if you couldn't dance.
I love this story. Keep on.
You have to know how to dance to work at Opryland. So I had never danced in my life because I spent my whole life playing for dances.
Yeah, right.
I was one of the musicians in the band playing for the dance, not
You
the
know what
band.
that reminds me of? The whole scenario, I can see it in my mind. Do you remember the Little Rascals and Alfalfa who was singing and dancing? I could just see you doing all that stuff.
Well, I got up there, and the first thing the choreographer was going to make us do was the Charleston. And I couldn't do no Charleston
Little
if you
knee
gave
thing.
me $1 million. And she literally came over to me. They wanted me pretty bad, I guess, because she literally came over and moved my legs in the direction that they needed to move. She literally picked my feet up off the floor and moved them in the direction she wanted me to do that Charleston. And I finally learned it well enough that it was time to sign the paperwork. And the director said, now, when will you be relocating to Nashville? I said, relocating to Nashville? They said, well, what are you going to do? Commute back and forth from Providence, Rhode Island to Nashville to do your 4 shows a day? I said, well, I didn't know I had to move. They said, well, what are you doing here auditioning for the job if you didn't know you had to go to Nashville? I didn't even know what Opryland was. I thought it was a carnival.
Does the color green ring a bell?
So we signed the paperwork for me to start Memorial Day weekend of 1977. I've been here ever since.
Man,
And
that's awesome.
when I was in the park, 77, 78, 79, and 80, in 1980, Kitty Wells's bass player signed an artist development contract with RCA.
Oh.
And when he signed that artist development contract with RCA, he didn't even give Johnny Wright, Kitty's husband, a 2-week notice, because he signed the artist development contract. He went over to Johnny's office, Wright's Enterprises on Old Hickory Boulevard, and he said, I'm going to have to leave the band. And Johnny said, you're going to leave the band? We're leaving at midnight. We got to go do the state fair in North Dakota. He said, I can't work for you, Johnny. I'm working for RCA Records now.
Wow.
So their booking agent, Roy Tessier, was still alive. And to show you how far back it goes, Roy Tessier's wife, Florence, was my school bus driver back home. So Johnny called up to Roy's office. He said, I'm leaving at midnight to go play the state fair in North Dakota. My bass player just quit. You know anybody that can play bass and front the show? And Roy said, not really. And Florence popped up and said, Keith's not working at Opryland anymore. He needs a job. So he sent me down there to meet Johnny. Johnny handed me a cassette tape and he said, this is the whole show. This is the Johnny and Jack songs, our son Bobby Wright songs, and Kitty songs. He says, take this home and take it with you on the bus tonight. Get your little Walkman with some headphones and learn these songs because we're going on stage tomorrow night. And I said, I'll take the cassette because you want me to, Johnny. But I said, I don't need this cassette. I know every song Kitty ever recorded and what key they're in. And I did because I was a Kitty Wells fan.
Wow. What luck. That's awesome.
And I was there for 16 years.
That is terrific. What was Kitty Wells really like? What was she really like?
People have asked me that question in various forms since they passed, since Johnny and Kitty passed. And I always tell them the same story about how humble she was. People
Really?
don't know how. Kitty never had a maid. She washed and ironed the clothes. There was no maid service. There was, Johnny mowed his own grass. He wouldn't even pay somebody to mow his grass. He mowed his grass right up to the end. But to show you how humble she was, I always tell the same story because it sums it up. You were talking about a visual with Alfalfa. If you don't get this visual in your mind after hearing this one, you'll never get a visual from me. We were in Germany. It was the last tour that Dottie West did. It was Dottie West, the Statler brothers, Kitty Wells, and a guy named Dave Dudley. Remember him? 6 Days on the Road?
On the Road.
That was the package. And we were in a big, huge arena in Germany. And we were backstage in the dressing room. It wasn't our turn to go on yet. The show had already started, and Kitty was just pacing back and forth, back and forth. I said, Kitty, what's wrong with you? And she said, nothing. I said, well, something's wrong with you. Do you have another one of your migraines? And she said, no, not tonight. I said, well, something's wrong with you. If you don't quit this pacing back and forth, you're going to wear the carpet out. She looked at me right between the eyeballs and said, do you think they'll know my songs? Oh. There was 30,000 people in that arena that had paid to go see her, and she was worried to death that they wouldn't know her songs.
Oh, how sad.
And I said, Kitty, not only are they going to know your songs, they'll probably sing along with you and know every word. And that made her feel a little bit better, and she went out there and did a heck of a show. But she was so concerned that we were in Germany and we were going to go out there on that show and that they weren't going to know her songs.
Wow. That's unbelievable. That's awesome.
I hope that answered your question.
Yes, it did. Well, you know, after you left Kitty Wells, I just kind of draw a blank there because I know that you were with Kitty Wells and I know that now you are in radio broadcasting. And I have no idea what happened during the years in between.
There were several jobs. 2 years with Freddie Hart. Remember him? Easy Lovin'?
Easy Lovin', yeah.
Okay. There was 2 years with him. There was 6 months with Stonewall Jackson.
I bet that was a trip.
I couldn't get along with Turk. I couldn't get along with Turk.
I tell you, I love Stoney, but he is a unique individual for sure.
You know, Turk is his son, the drummer.
Uh-huh.
I couldn't, we just couldn't get along. He accused me of rushing because I was the bass player, and I was accusing him of dragging, and we couldn't meet in the middle.
That makes sense.
4/4 shuffles have got to be on top of the beat.
Yeah.
It can't be behind the beat. It has
right.
to. If you're going to play Buck Owens and the Buckaroos or Ray Price, a 4/4 shuffle, it has to be on top of that shuffle beat, not behind it, or else it sounds like it's lagging.
Right.
And if the kick drum and the bass guitar is not
together, right? You're
banging all 4 quarter notes, it's not right.
Mm-hmm.
So that job only lasted 6 months with that particular artist.
Well, don't be angry. That's all I got to say.
Yeah, right. It worked out in the end.
So then what?
Then what? Mm-hmm. Well, let's see. There was Freddie Hart, Stonewall Jackson. Oh, there was a whole series of when Roy Tessier, the booking agent, had said, we need a backup band. We need this little band that, because by now, all the Opry stars were getting rid of their buses.
Mm. Really?
Yeah, there were. Gene Shepard had gotten rid of her bus. Billy Walker had gotten rid of his bus. Sheb Woolley had gotten rid of his bus. All the Opry stars had gotten rid of their buses. They were downsizing. And a lot of them dropped.
They go where they're going.
They were dropping their bands because they found out they could make more money driving to the gig in their car and using whatever band was there. Like these little Opries and stuff, they'd have a house band. Yeah. Just send the records up in advance so they could learn the songs. Well, Roy came up with the bright idea, Roy Tessier, the booking agent. He said, if we had a utility band, if we had a band that could learn all of these artists' songs, every time they go out on a gig, you guys will have a guaranteed gig because you can go and meet them there at the gig and you'll already have their set list learned.
Yeah, be set up, ready to roll.
So we formed this thing called Quick Change. That was the name of the band, Quick Change. And one time we would go out there and we would be Quick Change the band, and we'd do a little 45-minute opening set or whatever, take an intermission, go backstage, change shirts, come back out. And now we're Penny DeHaven and Quick Change, or Billy Walker and the Tennessee Walkers, or Jan Howard and Bad Seed. We would suddenly become a different band. And from gig to gig to gig, our name changed.
You had to be extremely versatile, extremely versatile.
Well, we had about 6 or 7 different artists that we were backing up throughout the year. And he was smart enough that he spaced their gigs. He spaced them out where we one weekend we might be with Billy Walker. Another weekend we might be with Jan Howard. And I'll never forget it. I tell everybody this. And they say, "Yeah, you're full of crap, like a Christmas turkey." George Strait was one of our opening acts. Mm-hmm. When we worked in Wisconsin at that festival, George Strait was one of the opening acts. That's the God's honest truth. He had 1 record out at the time. And when we played Bradenton, Florida, at the barn, Kitty's opening act that night was Garth Brooks.
Whoa.
I got pictures of it in my scrapbook to prove it.
Well, everybody got to start somewhere, I guess, Keith.
Sure was.
Well, you know, I told you I dissed George Strait over there at the bullpen back in, mid-'80s, I guess. Right. I didn't know who he was. And I was feeling kind of cocky because I'd sung in Nashville. And he reached out and took my arm and said, "Ma'am, will you sit and talk to us a minute?" And I went, "I'm with somebody." I walked over to the bar and everybody says, "What'd he say? What'd he say?" And I said, "Some dude just trying to pick me up." They said, "Do you know who that was that you just turned down?" I went, "No, who?" And George Strait. I went, "Let me just leave and go back to Alabama. I'm done."
You never know. You can't shun anybody.
Well, I learned. That was green. That was really green. I had no clue about anything, nothing. I just knew I'd like to sing.
You can't shun anybody in this business. You never know who they know. Mm-hmm. You know, that's the other thing. They may not be somebody, but they may know somebody who is. And
you know, I had a fellow tell me several years ago here in our area, a great little drummer. Of course, he's an older guy now, but he was a kid then. He said, "One of these days, somebody that we know is going to know somebody who knew somebody who knew somebody who made it big."
The song 16th Avenue?
Yes, I love that. I love to do that song.
That sums it up right
yes,
there.
Yes, it does, doesn't it? Friend of a friend they knew. Yeah, absolutely.
But it's been quite a journey.
So you ended up in radio. How did that come about, Keith? I'm glad it did. But
I don't listen to country music radio because I can't stand what they're playing. So I decided I'm going to start a radio station and play what I want.
Good for you.
I can't stand top 40 country radio. I don't listen to it, and I'm not going to. Right. I couldn't tell you right now what's the #1 song in Billboard. I couldn't tell you.
I don't know either. And, you know, we understand that music changes over time because people change. You've got a new generation. I'm sure my mother was just heartbroken when it came from the big band era to Fats Domino singing My Blue Heaven, kind of swingy bluesy. She said, "Oh, he slaughtered that song." I said, "Well, how was it when you were young?" She said, "Not My Blue Heaven." Anyway, it was one of those songs. And I was amazed. So I'm sure that was a transition too. But country music is like 180 out from the traditional classic country that I remember. I mean, way, way off the beaten path. It's like rock and roll compared from Elvis's rock and roll and today's rock and roll. It's just nothing alike. Totally different.
So I decided, my brother Mike Bradford and myself decided, why don't we just start our own radio station and play what we like, mm-hmm. instead of having to listen to what they spoon feed us this music as country music, and we're supposed to accept it.
Right.
But when I think of country music, it doesn't have to go all the way back to Jimmy Rogers.
Right.
But from the 50s on, that was country music. That was country. Webb Pierce and Farron Young and
Yeah.
those Patsy Cline, those people, that was country music back
Correct.
then. And that's what I play. That's what I play on my shows. What I want to
I
play.
love it. I love it. That's the best stuff in the world. The Skeeter Davises and the, you know, all of those folks were just icons. And the young people don't even know who you're talking about. It's like asking them about Roy Rogers. They don't have a clue who Roy Rogers was either.
There you go. I mean, but you asked, why did we start a radio station? We started a radio station because we were sick and tired of hearing what country music radio is. And we decided we were going to play what we wanted to play. And that's what we do. We play what we want to play.
I know we're probably running out of time. We're going to have too much data to transfer, but I want to ask you something. And this is a real big concern of mine. I talked to Billy Bowles and Mr. Newton, I believe, the AWA. And I said, you know, mainstream media has total control of what's being played on Sirius XM, for instance, your car radio when you ride down the road. And there's indie artists out there who are just great. They're great writers, great performers. They're absolutely awesome. But if you get in your car and you head down the road and flip on the radio, you're not going to hear them because mainstream media radio is controlled by this group, this small little entity, and they have that monopoly. What do you suggest, or do you think the internet is going to change that? What is the future for the indie artists, really?
I think the indie artist is always going to be the indie artist. And
Really?
the reason why is it's a money game.
Mm-hmm.
It's one big giant money game. And the
Right.
guy with the most money is the one that's going to be on top. And you can be better. You can be better than the best female vocalist out there. The one that wins every year at the ACMs and the CMAs.
Mm-hmm.
But you're still going to be beneath her. You're not going to reach her height or go past her.
Well, let me toss something at you right quick, because I was talking to Billy and to Mr. Newsom. I wish I could remember names. I said, for instance, we'll just use the AWA as an example, the Academy of Western Artists. Let's just use that for an example. What if we could find a major recording artist in the country music field, one who is not afraid to be a little different, who has plenty of money, who has his name and the clout already up there, who says, I believe in what you're trying to do. I'm going to back this. I'm going to get some of my peers over here to back you, and we're going to make this a big deal so that when the CMA Awards come on a Saturday night on one channel, and the AWA, for instance, comes on the other channel at the same time, people are going to say, I'm not watching that. I'm going to turn over here to AWA. They've got some really cool people over here. That could happen if you got the right people behind you. Then they could play that money game. And I'm willing to work for it.
I'm going to accept what you just said as the gospel truth, as something that could happen. I'm going to accept it for face value. However, I have to interject something.
Okay.
In order to do that, that artist, male or female that you're describing, they have to buck the system.
Right. Hank Williams Jr. loves to do that.
Right. But let's just take one name who bucked the system and disappeared. Ricky Van Shelton.
Good point. Good point.
How can you deny what I just said?
You're right. You're right. But somebody who's already made their way and they're ready to retire anyway, we got to find the right person. I think it's a great thing to try to do. I mean, it may never work, but what does it hurt to try? Then maybe my record would get played on Sirius XM. And yours and everybody's.
They're good enough.
No, it's just a shame, isn't it? Truly, all jokes aside, it's a shame because back in the day, we could have a dream. 16th Avenue, you come to Nashville with a guitar on your back and you want to make it. You could take your little 45 that you saved, your nickels and dimes, and you cut it in the studio, and you could take it to radio stations, and they would play it. And because of your ability and your talent, it would have a chance to get somewhere. Those days are gone. They're gone. And that's sad. That's really sad.
The one thing that would tickle me more than anything else is everything that we said during this last 20 minutes.
Mhm.
Nothing would tickle me more than to have 1 million views on YouTube.
Well, let's do it. See,
Nothing would tickle me
I'm
more.
72 years old, Keith, and I'm at that age to where I won't even say what this stands for, but I have a terminal case of Idgara. I don't give a rusty, so I'm not afraid, and I will push it and prod it and poke it if I believe in it to the max degree, because that's the right thing to do.
The one thing they cannot say is that we told a lie
True. Exactly.
during this segment.
Not one single little white one.
So
It's
no
all
one
fact.
can say they're full of crap. They lied and they did this and they did that for the last 20 minutes. And they can talk about us all they want, but they can't say that we're lying, because we're not.
My husband used to have a saying, they can kill us, but they can't eat us. You know, I think you're like I am, and like a lot of people I know. I love my music. I love it. It comes from the heart. When I'm playing music, I forget every problem I ever had in the whole world. And there are people out there who aren't musicians or artists, and when they listen to that music, they can forget their problems, and it makes their day go better. And music is just such a driving force. It's such an inspiration. And we need to just keep this stuff alive the best way we know how.
Well, that's what we're going to try to do.
That's why we have NBRN and people like Keith and Mike Bradford who put it out there, who tell it like it needs to be told, and who hire people like me who don't have any better sense than to get on that soapbox.
There you go.
Keith, I love you, man. You know what? This is the first time we've ever talked and been able to look at each other face to face. I went to work for you on the telephone, and this has been just so much fun, and I've enjoyed it. Now, when I come to Nashville, I'll know who you are when I pass you on the street, and we can have a cup of coffee and just solve the whole world's problems.
Sounds good to me. Let's do this again sometime.
I love it. And you know what? I don't know if this is going to go on my show or not, but just in case it is, I'll pause so you can click this in there later. This is Alicia saying, please join me right here next time on NBRN, the Nashville Broadcasting Radio Network. Until then, from country music around the world, this is Alicia saying, so long until next time, keep it real, and may God bless you real good.
If your day is good or bad, whether you are mad or glad, if you feel sad or blue, just remember someone loves you. You gotta love it, you gotta love it is the only way to face each and every day. The world will keep on turning, and we will keep on learning.